You open your eyes, and the first thing you feel is cold metal pinning your leg to the earth. Your face is caked in blood that has already frozen solid. The engine that was humming just minutes ago is completely silent, and outside nothing but white. Miles and miles of white stretching in every direction with zero sign of human life. Your radio is dead, your phone has no signal, the temperature is plunging towards -20, and somewhere out in the dark, something is circling you. Most people die in Alaska, not from one mistake, but from a slow, quiet series of them. Jack Miller was about to make every single one of them, and somehow he was going to live to tell it. If you've ever felt like the world left you behind, like the odds were stacked against you, so high that giving up seemed like the only choice, this story is going to hit you differently. Subscribe to CrimeFlux right now, because every week we bring you the most jaw-dropping stories of survival, revenge, and human endurance on this platform. Drop a comment below. What is the one item you would grab if your plane crashed in the wilderness? Let's get into it. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October. Jack Miller, a 44-year-old bush pilot with over 6,000 flight hours, was doing what he does dozens of times before, driving a Cessna 172 loaded with medical supplies and food to a remote village about 140 miles. The sky was grey but manageable, wind was steady, visibility acceptable. Then at roughly 80 miles out, somewhere over a nameless mountain range, the engine coughed once, then twice, then silence. Not the comfortable silence of cruising altitude, the horrifying silence of a machine that has simply stopped. Jack had about 90 seconds to find a surface, any surface, before physics took over completely. He spotted a frozen clearing between two ridgelines and aimed for it. The nose clipped a tree line. The right wing sheared off. The fuselage skidded sideways across the ice and slammed into a boulder. When Jack came back to consciousness, he had no idea how long he had been out. Could have been 3 minutes, could have been an hour. His left leg was pinned under the crumpled instrument panel. He could feel the bone before he could see his injury. A deep pressure that told him something was wrong. He clenched himself free using his arms alone, leaving a smear of dark red across the snow. The smell of fuel was everywhere. Jack had enough training to know what that meant. Get away from the wreckage immediately. He dragged himself 30 feet from the plane before his arms gave out. He laid there in the snow, panting, staring up at the colourless sky, and took stock of what he had. A survival kit that could have been partly ejected in the crash. He could see it lodged in a tree branch 12 feet away. A flare gun with 2 flares, a folding knife, a lighter with an unknown amount of fuel, 1 protein bar, an emergency blanket, crumpled but intact, and a photograph tucked inside his breast pocket. His daughter, Emma, in a cap and gown at a rehearsal fitting, laughing at something off camera. Graduation was in 8 days. Here is the first brutal truth about survival. The first 6 hours are when most people die emotionally, not physically. The body is still warm. The shock is still providing a kind of numbness. But the mind starts doing math it was never designed to do. How far am I from help? Does anyone know where I am? Jack's emergency locator transmitter, the device that automatically broadcasts a distress signal on impact, had been damaged in the crash. He confirmed this by crawling back to the wreckage and checking the indicator light. Dark, no signal going out. He made a decision that could cost him hours he couldn't afford. He stayed with the plane and waited for a rescue that was not coming. But 6 hours, the sun had begun its early descent. The temperature, already brutal, dropped another 15 degrees in under an hour. His breath was now a visible fog cloud. His fingers, which had been numb since the crash, were entering a more serious stage, the kind of cold where you can't feel the damage happening. The wilderness had not even started with him yet. Night in interior Alaska in late October is not a metaphor, it's a physical force. By 5:30 p.m, all light was gone. The temperature hit -30, not wind chill, actual temperature. At -30, exposed skin develops frostbite in under 10 minutes. Exhaled moisture freezes before it dissipates. Metal becomes brittle, thoughts become slow. Jack had managed to build a shelter using pine burrow layered against the intact side of the fuselage, with a section of torn aircraft wing as a roof panel. It was the smartest thing he did that night. Inside that crude space, his body heat had a chance of accumulating instead of disappearing instantly into the open air. He wrapped himself in the blanket and pressed himself against the fuselage wall. His leg was now visibly swollen, the skin tight and bruised, purple beneath the torn fabric of his flight suit. Every time he shifted his weight, the pain was a white-hot spike shooting from his ankle to his hip. He suspected a fractured spine. He was correct, as doctors would later confirm. He was not sleeping, he was hovering, that grey middle ground between exhausted unconsciousness and hyper-alert fear. His mind kept circling back to Emma, to the rehearsal photo, to the speech he had been mentally rehearsing for weeks. I am not going to miss it. I am not going to miss it. And then he heard it. A sound that every seasoned pilot, ranger and hunter would tell you is unmistakable and unforgetful. A low, rolling sound, not a growl exactly, more like a pure threat, coming from the tree line about 40 feet to the left. Jack's hands found the flare gun before his brain had fully processed the sound. In Alaska, grizzly bears do not hibernate on a fixed schedule. A bear emerging from a light or interrupted torpor in late October is one of the most dangerous animals on the continent. Disorientated, aggressively hungry, and willing to investigate anything that smelled like food. Jack's blood-soaked flight suit and the fuel and metal scent of the wreckage had created a scent trail that this bear had followed for possibly miles. For 4 hours, he knows it was 4 hours because he managed to keep his watch functioning. Jack sat in complete darkness inside his shelter, flare gun pointed towards the opening, and watched two amber eyes track slowly back and forth across the snow in front of him. The bear never charged, but it never left either. It paced, it sniffed. Once it came close enough that he could hear it breathing, a wet, heavy sound like a bellow. Jack did not sleep that night, not 1 minute. By 6 o'clock, the eyes were gone. By 7 o'clock, daylight was returning, and Jack Miller had made a new decision. Staying with the wreckage was a death sentence. He had to move. Moving on a fractured tibia through unbroken wilderness with no snowshoes, no trekking pole, and no food is something that very few people have done, and even fewer have survived. Jack improvised a splint from 2 pieces of aluminium thread from the plane, bound with strips of his thermal undershirt. It was crude, and it slipped repeatedly, but it gave him just enough stability to move. He remembered from an old survival manual he had read years before the half-forgotten, a seasonal fishing camp on a frozen river approximately 10 miles to the east. 10 miles, under normal conditions, a 2-hour walk. In this condition, through 4 feet of snow, dragging a broken leg, he estimated 2 days if he pushed hard. He started walking at 7:45 on day 2. By hour 45, he had covered approximately 4 miles. He was eating snow for hydration, which he knew was a mistake because snow consumption drops core body temperature. But his options were limited. Hallucinations began somewhere around hour 48, minor at first, a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision that resolved into nothing when he turned, then more vivid. He saw his kitchen, he smelt coffee. Once, with startling clarity, he heard Emma's voice calling his name from behind a cluster of trees. He walked towards the sound. There was nothing there except more snow and more silence. At hour 55, the wilderness delivered its most punishing moment. Jack stepped onto what appeared to be a solid snow surface between 2 large trees and immediately began to sink. A trap, a phenomenon where deep, unconsolidated snow accumulates around a tree trunk and creates a pocket that can swallow a person whole. Within seconds, he was buried to his chest. He tried to twist his weight. His broken legs screamed at the movement. The snow compressed around him like wet cement. He stopped fighting. In this moment, described by hypothermia researchers as the surrender point, where the body's exhaustion and the mind's depletion converge into a simple, terrible stillness. Jack later describes it as not a decision exactly, but a release. The pain stopped. The cold stopped feeling like cold and started feeling like warmth. His eyes closed. The wilderness had never been more certain of his victory. What happened next, Jack has described in multiple interviews, and is consistent every single time. He felt warm, not the dangerous false warmth of terminal hypothermia, but a different kind, a memory arriving with almost supernatural force and clarity. Emma, age 7, falling off a bike in their driveway. He had been inside, he heard her cry, and he had ran, not walk, ran across that yard because the sound of his child in pain was the most powerful override switch in his nervous system. She needs you to run, get up and run. He started digging. With his bare hands, his gloves had been lost in the trap. Jack clawed at the snow. His fingernails tore, his fingers bled, and the blood froze on his knuckles within seconds. He dug for 3 hours, not continuously. He had to rest, had to catch his breath, had to fight the grey curtain of unconsciousness that kept drifting across his vision. But every time he stopped, he heard Emma's voice and he started again. He hauled himself out of the trap at approximately 2:15 on day 3. He laid on top of the snow, face up, staring at the sky that had shifted from grey to watery blue. He had no food, no feeling in his 3 fingers on his right hand, and roughly 2 miles left to the river. He dragged himself, literally dragged, barely crawling, when walking with impossible lurching upright when he had enough ground firmness to attempt it. The river appeared at the edge of his vision like a hallucination he refused to believe in. He blinked, it was still there, a wild frozen channel running north-south across the valley, and then the sound. Not a bird, not the wind working through the canopy, a rhythmic, mechanical, unmistakable persecution of rotor blades. Jack's hand went to his watch. The crystal was cracked, but the face was intact. He angled it towards the thin water sun and swept it back and forth in a slow arc, the oldest emergency signal in the world, a helographic made from a broken watch face, a flash of cold light bouncing off the white landscape. The helicopter banked, it circled once, it descended. The search and rescue crew that found Jack Miller on the bank of that frozen river later said he looked like a man who had been in a fight with the entire state of Alaska and refused to accept the verdict. He had lost 15 pounds in 72 hours. The tip of his fingers on his right hand required treatment for deep frostbite. His tibia had a spinal fracture that required surgical repair. He was, according to the attending trauma physician, approximately 15 minutes from complete multi-organ failure. He was alive. 8 days later, Jack Miller sat in the 3rd row of a university auditorium and watched his daughter Emma walk across the stage to collect her degree. He was wearing a walking boot. His right hand was partially bandaged. He cried before her name was even called. Alaska is one of the last places on earth that does not care about you. It does not care about your plans, your family, your fear, or your willpower. It is simply indifferent, vast and cold and ancient, in a way that makes human life feel genuinely fragile. Jack Miller did not survive because he was the most skillful pilot or the most physically fit man in that wilderness. He survived because every time the cold gave him a reason to stop, a 7-year-old girl falling off her bike gave him a reason to keep moving. The lesson is not about Alaska. The lesson is about what you anchor yourself to when everything else has been taken away. What is a one item you would want if your plane went down in Alaska wilderness? A fire starter, a knife, a phone, or something else entirely? Tell us below. If this story moved you, hit that thumbs up. It genuinely helps us bring you more stories like this one. And if you want to go deeper, our video on the Oakenhaven mystery is right there on your screen. Subscribe so you never miss one of these. Stay sharp, stay resilient. I'll see you in the next one.